people are just for whatever reason more comfortable just coming in hot
Yeah.
instead of being vulnerable and saying like, this is scaring me. You're scaring the kids.
Sure.
I mean, not to guilt trip, like truly when I say coming from a very loving place and not when everything's all hot and bothered because he didn't show up to the appointment that you made 3 months ago and made work with the schedule and spent, right? Like that's how you feel. You're like,
Yeah.
I spent like an hour getting this thing together and you just like forgot or had like a work appointment today. Like you're like, I mean, not that that's ever happened in my family.
No.
Hi, I'm Jen.
Hey, I'm Suzanne, and today we're talking about the blurry line when it comes to your husband's health and what your responsibility is as his wife and partner. So the reason I brought this up is not only, of course, does it affect me, but it's like come up in like 6 different conversations with various friends over the last couple weeks because I think we're at an age where we're trying to figure out what our role is in our husband's or partner's life. And in terms of like health and what's the difference between being a caretaker and supportive versus just a totally hands-off approach. And so like on the one hand, I had a friend who was saying that she feels like her husband's personal assistant. She books all of his doctor's appointments. She's doing all the follow-ups. Well, what did the results say? Getting him back there. He's bitching and complaining at her. Like, why are you always on me? And so, of course, she's getting resentful because she's like, dude, you're asking me to do all of this.
And then you're blaming me.
And you're blaming me. And what the heck?
Yeah.
Like, you're a grown man,
Sure.
And then I had another friend who was almost exactly opposite. She was like, oh, no, that's completely his responsibility. That is not my job. He needs to take care of it. But I'm super resentful because he doesn't do it in the way that I would like him to. Like he hasn't been to the doctor in 3 years, but that's not my problem.
Sure.
The problem with her approach is her husband is not feeling well and he's tired all the time. Like she's like, I think he needs to be on a CPAP. And by the way, she gave me permission. The people gave me permission to talk about these. So she's frustrated because she's like, you're not really available for the family. You're tired. And he just complains or is just like, he's like, fine, then make me a doctor's appointment. She's like, you're fully capable of making a doctor's appointment. Like, why is it my responsibility? Have you ever had this particular issue in your marriage?
Oh, yeah. I think it's so hard because you kind of just get in the habit of taking care of the kids and doing all their doctor's appointments.
Yep.
And then it just becomes easy to do that. But Jason and I don't really remember when, but I wouldn't say I'm just like hands off and I don't like, it's your business because that almost feels like slightly like it's just, I guess it depends where it's coming from. So
Sure.
For us, I was like, hey, I don't know your schedule. It's too much for me to schedule everything. Then you get mad because I scheduled it for this time. Like it was just one of those things. Like there was no big falling out or falderah, but we just decided I would be in charge of making the appointments for the kids and myself, and that he ultimately was responsible for making his appointments.
Yeah.
And I can say some things he keeps up on and other things like the dentist or the eye appointment. I think he tells me once a month he needs to make appointments. And occasionally I'll send him the contact information. And we all know as moms, resend the information we've already resent. We all wish we could say, as per my previous email.
Right.
But we don't. But that's how we do it.
Okay.
And then as he's wanted to do, like get into the gym or whatever, it's been very much like super encouraging. I think that would be great. But I have learned, for us at least, there can be slight suggestion, but it really needs to come from a loving place and it needs to not come from any sort of resentment. I mean, I think that's with all interactions as hard as it is, but it really can't be like you're tired and it's annoying me, right? It has to come from a time when you're like, you're tired, like speaking to your friend, like, hey, I've noticed that because you are tired, here's a few examples of times you missed out with the family and it concerns me. It hurts my feelings. It's a very different conversation, I guess, like to have that type of a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not the responsibility, but I think they're all intertwined. So it's hard not to talk about one without the other.
Well, I
But
think
I
it's
think this,
super yeah, and I think it's really I think you make a good point. Like, you get so used to your routine becomes making all the appointments for everyone, and your husband or your partner almost just gets put into that, like,
Mhm.
flow.
Yeah,
And I come from a unique standpoint in that
you
my
do.
husband, Greg, has a genetic disease he was born with called cystic fibrosis, where when I married him, I knew that he
Yeah.
was likely at some point going to need a double lung transplant. From the outside, he looked very healthy. And when we got married, he was very much in a healthy phase, but we knew it was an
Mhm.
eventuality or an
Mhm.
expected eventuality. And so his health was very much a part of our relationship and part of kind
Mhm.
of the teamwork that we needed to have to make sure he was healthy and whole for us and moving forward and for himself.
Right.
And then as time moved on, I found that it went from him to, because we didn't get married till we were 30. So he
Right.
was far down the road. And
Fully
I
capable of making all his appointments
and
for
had been doing it
at
for
least
quite
from
some
20 to
time.
30, right? Like
Yes.
for a long time. It wasn't like he just went from his mom making his appointments to you making his appointments, right?
Yes. Yes. And the thing is like, it's not just when you have that kind of a condition. It's not just like he was really good about making just the regular appointments with his clinic
Right.
because they had a specialized clinic. It was all the other stuff that goes along with it that he'd be
Mhm.
affected by that. And like what he needed to eat and like so like it was the whole like, are you exercising? Are
And
you
all
getting
the
good
ancillary
sleep?
things,
Yes. And like so
the things
things that
that weren't part of like you're expected to come back every 3 months and before you leave we're going to make you make your next appointment, like that's part of the protocol, if you will, and it
yes.
almost was scheduled for him
Yes.
versus, and by the way, you need to eat this certain way and you need to work out and you need to be taking these supplements and you need to be, I don't know, seeing the eye doctor, and oh, by the way, you got to go see the dentist, and oh, by the way, you need to work out, and I don't know, which
Yeah.
they
And
told
I
him, but it wasn't like this is the
yeah.
schedule.
Yeah, and I think ancillary is a really good word, and also because when I signed up for this, when we decided to get married, like, not that I was aware of everything, but I was aware of
Sure.
what I was getting into, and, like, as part caretaker, like, as his wife, I felt that was, like, a supportive role for me, was like, "Hey, I can
Hmm.
take a little bit off of you," like, we talk a lot about mental loads, and I
Hmm.
can take some of this mental load off. And then with time and personality and teaching that I
Life.
grew up with and life, all of a sudden I'm having kids and I'm finding now I'm responsible for a whole lot related to my husband. And
Hmm.
I was like, wait a minute. Like, and again, our husbands are well aware of what we talk about here. They listen to our episodes, so no, I'm not
Yeah.
throwing my husband under the bus. But with time, it was like, wait a minute, like, what is my responsibility here? And at times I'd find myself being super resentful because I felt overwhelmed. And it was like almost like
Hmm.
the pendulum shifted and I
Hmm.
felt like it was too much. And I think as so much about relationships are, it's very much a pendulum and you kind of have to kind of find yourself in a rhythm or try to get back to the middle and try to do it in kindness. And, but what I found is that I was seeking control of him, like seeking control of the situation, not of him, but of his health by over functioning, by over controlling. I went from like loving and just trying to be supportive of him
Hmm.
to trying to almost wrap my hands around everything or wrap my arms around everything to
Hmm.
control it. Right?
Right. To control, not to control him, but
Correct.
to control the situation. Like if I do all these things,
Correct.
then he'll stay as healthy as possible, right? And if I don't do these things, which is really what's driving you, if I
Correct. The
don't do
fear.
these things, that everything's going to fall apart, right? And you almost
Yeah.
get it back into our mom martyrdom, but in this case, it's wife martyrdom of like telling yourself the story of if I don't do all these things and I'm not completely in charge of this whole thing and telling him all the things he needs to do, this whole thing's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And then where will we be? And then we'll be husbandless and, dadless and,
Yeah.
like horrible things to
Yeah.
catastrophize.
Yeah.
Plausible. But then you get in that just, I think it's like a survival mode. It
It
becomes
is.
relenting and like overwhelming. But like you can't stop yourself from doing, like it just
Yeah.
drives you.
It creates the frenetic
Yes.
need to do something. Because if you're not
Yes.
doing something, and it's so similar to all the other things we've talked about, but now it feels like the stakes are even higher, right? Like,
Of
oh my
course, they
gosh. And
are.
and and his health was deteriorating at the time. And I'll be like, he was doing things for his health, guys. Like it wasn't that he wasn't taking care of himself or doing things. It was also the burden I took on. It was the
Yeah.
responsibility I took on. And I think that was the question I had for both sets of my friends that I was talking to is like,
Mhm.
well, was this something you guys were talking about? Did he ask you to do it? And in my case, I had set a precedent for a long time about I was going to take everything over. And then I would start to get resentful and he'd be like, Suzanne, you you're the one that
Yeah.
told me you take care of this. And I'd be like, but I can't do all of this anymore. And you don't
Yes.
do anything because now you go to the
Yes.
all or
The
nothings. And
oh, yeah.
you know, at the time I just remember him looking at me and being like, well, then let's figure out like let's find a middle ground.
Yeah.
And I was like, but hey, your health's declining and we're like literally talking about double lung transplant here. Like you don't have time for this. You don't have, and again, I was trying to take everything off of him and just
Mhm.
Suzanne, you can take it, pile it on yourself. Well, fast forward real quickly, we got a miracle in 2018. They came out with a miracle drug. My husband is doing great. We have no lung issues, or not no lung issues, but we have no lung transplants in our future. To the extent we know, he's so much healthier. I could not be more excited. But as a result of that, now, fast forward, let's call 6 years later. And I think what I'm trying to figure out along and what these questions brought up my friends brought up is like, well, what is my role now in his health? Like now that we don't have this potentially catastrophic, truly catastrophic event
Mhm.
occurring, and he can take care of himself and he's willing to take care of himself. What I realize is because I kept trying to like hoard it because operating out of fear and attempt at control and being scared is what's my role? And I think when
Mhm.
I started to discover those thoughts of, but I have to control it all, like I said, that frenetic energy, the shift that I've been feeling lately is what if it wasn't my responsibility, but it was something where I found support? Like, how do I support you, husband? Similar to, I think, what you've already said here, which is like, how do I support you in your health journey? If you need to make doctor's appointments or get blood work or supplements or diet or what to eat, like, and how do we do that as opposed to being like codependent, where it's like if
Mm.
I don't do it, doesn't get done, or if he
Mhm.
doesn't do it, it doesn't get done. So I feel like it's two very polarized ways of thinking about it of it's kind
Mhm.
of the all or nothing, or I guess it is all or nothing. Like I'm going to do
Mhm.
everything because he can't, or I'm going to do nothing because he's a grown man.
Yeah.
And so I think the shift is having a conversation and saying, and I think it's gonna, or well, first let me finish that thought. Is saying like, how do I support you in your health journey or in your health or with whatever specific topic it is, because it's all specific to us and our relationship, but also being able to step back
Mhm.
and be okay with him not doing it. Similarly, we've talked about with our kids, not doing it the way that you want him to do it,
Yes.
the quote unquote right way.
The right way. And I think that your situation is very different. And I think everyone finds themselves in the same, as I was sitting here listening, finds themselves in a similar position because you went from needing a lot of medical care, and not that he doesn't need medical care anymore, but
Sure.
a very high volume of
Hmm.
needs to a lower volume of needs. And the needs are more things that he can take care of, right? Like it doesn't matter how bad he wants to like get in shape or work out or build muscle or lose weight or whatever, right? Like we all know that the person, whoever it is, friend, sister,
Yeah.
husband, they have to decide they want to do it. And then it's just your job to support them, not do it for them, but to support them, right? And so I think that your conversation is, hey, the stakes have changed. The volume has changed. It's time for us to have another discussion about how we want to handle this moving forward. And then the flip side, like you were talking about age, is the people that are over here that don't have like a big medical condition. We're getting older and like you can't just skip your doctor's appointment for 5 years anymore because you're not in your 20s anymore. And even in your 30s, like you're heading into your 40s and 50s. And so the volume is going up. So what used to be like, hey, I made your one dentist appointment a month, a year, and your one annual a year, and maybe an eye exam, right? So it's like the wife went from maybe making a few appointments to like, oh, and by the way, you need a CPAP now, which is going to require a sleep study and a this and a that, right? So it's like
Mhm.
the volume is increasing, and I feel like the wives are having the same conversation, but for different reasons. But the same conversation is needing to be had, which is I have been doing this. The onus is on me for taking it because I wanted the control because it made me feel better. But now I realize I don't want it anymore. So you have to admit that you took it in the first
For
place
sure.
and that you don't want it anymore. And then have the conversation of like, what are your goals? And like, how can I? And I would like you to take this back or these parts back, which I think that just so many people have such a hard time having these types of conversations because they seem so big because you're so emotional about it,
Sure.
whether it be resentment or you're scared that they're going to die or you're scared that they're not taking care of themselves, but instead of saying, hey, you're scaring me,
Mhm.
you're like, I feel so much better being mad at you.
Sure. You need
So
to get
I'm
to the
just going to
gym.
be right. So it's like people are just for whatever reason more comfortable just coming in hot
Yeah.
instead of being vulnerable and saying, like, this is scaring me. You're scaring the kids. You can't. I
Sure.
mean, not to guilt trip, like truly when I say coming from a very loving place and not when everything's all hot and bothered because he didn't show up to the appointment that made 3 months ago and made work with the schedule and spent, right? Like that's how you feel. You're like, I
Yeah.
spent like an hour getting this thing together and you just like forgot or had like a work appointment today. Like you're like, I
Well,
mean,
but and I
not that
also
that's
think
ever happened in my family.
no, no. But I also think, I guess, we've talked a lot about ourselves. We've talked a lot about our kids on the show and a little
Hmm.
bit about our spouses. But this one felt, and the more we've talked about it, it's just a bigger
Hmm.
issue, right? So this is like a microcosm of a bigger issue, which is
Absolutely.
things are constantly changing in relationships. And as we get older and we're moving along in the stages of our kids' relationships and as we get older and all those things. And it was just a reminder to me that also there is not like one solution. I think my whole life,
No.
and we get told this by the media and by
Yeah.
marketers all the time, which is
Yes.
like, this is your one solution. And what I keep
Yes.
realizing over time is like, that might be your solution for now. But just because it
Yes.
was your solution for now doesn't mean it can't change. And so I had to
Yes.
remind myself of that. And when in talking with my two girlfriends, one of them texted me like yesterday and was like, I ended up having a conversation with my husband and it
Oh,
went
I
really
love that.
well. And it was such a
Awesome.
great thing that like, and then I came home and like started talking to Greg about it and was like, hey,
Mhm.
yeah, we need to talk about this a little bit more. And even with time, I mean, we've been talking about it for a while and he's been taking more and more over these last couple of years, like the healthier he's been.
Sure.
But it's also just the communication that needs to happen. And also, so I guess when I'd be wrapping up, my thought is there's a difference between love and control. When I say love, that's support, right? That's
Mhm.
to me, love looks a lot like support. And how can I support you in this? Where
Yes.
you're not doing everything, but you're not doing anything. Like you're finding that like
Yes.
middle ground. And that when you release that responsibility, then you can have a good relationship and you can have communication about it and you can come to a decision where you're having those decisions and those conversations in love and without like doesn't mean you're not going to get heated or emotional, but like as you said, you're
Mhm.
not coming in
Yeah.
hot. You're actually
Yes.
trying to resolve an issue.
No one's right or wrong, right? Like that's the thing. Like it's
Yes.
not. And the other thing that came up for me, because we talk a lot about it, is when it comes to health and like your body and taking care of yourself, there's so much shame attached to it. And I feel that we forget that our partner, because I know I struggle with a lot of shame. We've
For
already
sure.
talked about my Ozempic episode, etc. That we forget because we're just like, well, of course you're going to go take care of yourself. It's like this huge expectation that we don't even necessarily have of ourselves. Like they probably have some sort of, there's a reason Like if there's something that you're feeling resentful, like not the doctor's appointments, but like if they're like not, you know, they know they need a CPAP, but they won't go get their sleep study. They
Yeah.
know that something might be wrong and they're not making the follow up appointment. Like they're scared and there's shame for like not being healthy. Right. And so there's so many other emotions that, especially with our husbands, I feel like we forget. And sometimes it's hard to remember that they're human. And so maybe asking the question, not like, are you feeling shame? But like, hey, I noticed you haven't made the appointment. Like, what's going
What's
on?
going
Right.
on?
And if they're like,
Mhm.
I'm going to make the appointment, you're like, oh, that's a clue that there's a lot more going on. Right. So I think there's just like tying that communication back in there as well, because it's just so easy to be like, you're a loser. Why aren't you taking care of yourself? Like, why can't you do this? Just make it happen. Like, I have too much on my plate. Right. Like, you just feel this,
Yeah.
like, just do this for me. Right. And
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah. I
about
think it's a
that.
good point.
So I wanted to tie that in because I
Yeah.
think it's such a big concept, but to wrap up like the over functioning that's disguised as being loving, or I mean, if you were to like look at all of our episodes, we are constantly over functioning and then being resentful and saying this is love. And it's just so I'm so glad you brought up an episode that touches pretty much anyone in a relationship, whether you're married, have kids, or
Yeah.
whatever. Your partner, like you want them to live and to be healthy. Like that's what we
Yeah.
all want.
Yeah.
So I think it touches everyone. And I guess the question for the listeners would be today, like, where are you over functioning? Is it with your partner's health, or is it maybe something else you feel like they're not doing and could affect you? And so you're over functioning by doing something else for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for today.
We hope you discovered something in my story.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.